Hello, everyone. How are you? Happy to be here. I'm Ced. I'm the owner of Kokua Smiles. We're a small group practice in, she said Honolulu, but we're actually in Honolulu and actually in a place called Aiea, which is right near Pearl Harbor. And so before I get started into the actual meat of my presentation, I did want to show you some photos. We're from Hawaii, and so I want to have a chance to show my beautiful state to y'all. So first of all, this is a picture of a really beautiful beach that I love. It's called Keiki Beach on the left side. It's on the North Shore. For those who've been there, it's where the big waves are that all the surfers go and compete every year. The one on the right is actually from Outrigger Canoe Club. It's a beautiful beach club that I go to and I love. It actually shows me a big, beautiful view of the actual coastline of Waikiki. Oh, am I working? There we go. And this photo here is a beautiful spot. This is actually at the Hualai Resort. Some of you have been there. It's on the Kona coast. Amazing place, probably the best beachfront property in the world that I can actually visit to. And just an amazing spot that I'd like to share. If you guys ever have a chance to go to Kona, make sure you guys go to that place. And then the last picture is just Waikiki Beach. This is Diamond Head. Many of you have been to Waikiki before. Diamond Head's kind of a landmark there that we all know of. This place, great place to hike. I go there hiking regularly there myself, and it's a great place for views of Waikiki Beach and around the ocean there. So I really encourage you guys all to come, especially with the economy that's taken a big hit when it came to tourism in Hawaii. We're welcoming people back. We all do hope you visit our state. So before I go into the meat of my presentation, I want to talk about why I'm here. Besides the idea of obviously spreading a little aloha from Hawaii, my opportunity today is to basically hopefully give you guys some hope and inspiration of how to create better practices, more productivity, and better lives for you and your team. You guys have all kind of heard all the operational techniques of a lot of the little secrets, I would say, that a lot of these great practices have done to create those transformative results. But I think what I want to spend my time on today is like really kind of spending time on an underappreciated value in the dental organization, which is servant leadership. Because a lot of what you've learned are all very important, they're very tangible, they're things you all should be doing in your own practices. But unless there's a real strong level of authentic servant leadership in the organization, from both the owner doctor to the associate doctors to the leaders within the organization and even our frontline people, it's really not going to work. In many respects, what I oftentimes find is unless that authentic leadership is there, you could literally have the best doctors, the best team, the best marketing plan, all the money in the world to basically scale and grow as a great community. But if there's a void in the right type of leadership, I would tell you that there's no chance of it growing and there's no chance of it being sustainable. So I oftentimes think it's undervalued and not talked about enough. So what I'm going to do today is to talk about how servant leadership can help an organization. I know a lot of it's thought about being ethereal, and that's great. Everyone's got to be great leaders. But I want to show you how servant leadership in my organization leads to tangible growth, leads to success, and leads to predictable rates of growth within the organization, so it is something that's worth putting time and effort into. So I'll start with basically our core value in the practice. Our core value, it's kind of our tenet, something our motto, it's something we bring up at every leadership meeting we have, and that is to serve people better. And why is that so important? Well, the reason I think it's so important, it kind of sets the tone for your entire company. And it does, and the most important part for those who are owner doctors out here, it really holds you accountable. Because every decision, every process we think about, everything we do in terms of creating a better organization for your team and patients has to meet that objective. And if it doesn't meet that objective, we just simply throw it to the heap. We just don't think it's worth talking about if it doesn't serve people better. And when I say serve people better, that's patients and that's your team members. And that's really critically important to concern those things, because I oftentimes feel it's a value that if infused well into your organization, especially in mine, that it leads to well-intentioned people. It leads to kind of an environment where it becomes a culture for the team, rather than you having to lead that team by pulling them up this mountain. You just have to point to basically your core value. And I oftentimes will do that at leadership meetings when someone will talk about, well, we should do this in the practice or this process or this kind of project. And I'll oftentimes lead with, well, how's that going to serve people better? You got to walk me through that. And oftentimes it really directs them in the right way, so it's not me telling them what to do. They're just leading an organization based on something we all believe strongly in. So what I'm hoping you get out of this presentation, like I said before, is that you've heard all the really wonderful things of hygiene capacity, how to monitor the value of the hygiene exam and what it leads to production, how to go about hiring people better, how to go about creating better compensation plans. What I want to focus on is how being a better servant leader, whether you're going to be an owner doctor, whether it's an associate doctor, whether it's an office manager, whether it's a lead assistant, by understanding that, by doing that and adopting that kind of viewpoint, it only leads to better results from your team. It leads to predictable results because engaged teams lead to actually great results. And that's something we focus on greatly in my organization. And the most important thing I always tell my leaders in my organization is that when it comes to serving people better, a lot of times people mistake that for me saying, well, that just means our patients. But for me and my team, it's always about the people in your organization first. Like I honestly would tell you, like if you're not focused on creating your team's results and meeting their goals and their objectives, they're just not going to take care of your patients the way you want. You might have all these ways and these tangible techniques and ways of these checklists of how you're going to go about creating a better practice for the patients. But unless your team feels they're engaged and rewarded in those events, they're simply just not going to buy in. So we're also going to talk about how these mission-driven incentive plans are going to really help you drive that culture. Like when I talk about serving people better, what I oftentimes feel is that I've got to be creating things that reward the right behavior, right? So I think a lot of times we think in terms of like, we're going to bonus on productivity. We're going to bonus on number of new patients. We're going to bonus on, capacity rate, whatever it might be in your organization. But unless that's actually incentivized to basically encourage the right behavior, those bonus plans simply just don't last. They're not very sustainable. So I'd always kind of talk about your plans for your bonus plans need to basically meet the objectives you have, but they got to be bigger than just about money. They got to be bigger about just hitting KPIs. They got to be bigger about just making more money. So I oftentimes always lead that in my team in terms of let's create bonus plans that are creating the right behavior, but leading to a bigger purpose than themselves. So we'll also talk about today what customer service really means. I think a lot of times we sometimes get diluted from an industry standpoint, thinking customer service means certain things to patients. I'm going to challenge you today, think of it differently, what patients honestly really want and how we need to meet those objectives to create a successful practice. And the last thing I'll kind of talk a little bit more granular about was how to really be a better servant leader by kind of following some certain techniques that I work with my own team so you can develop into a great leader for your own organization. So who are we? So, as I said before, we're Kukua Smiles. We're two large practices initially. I started with Wildlife Dental Care back in 2003. We started off as a 800 square foot, 2-chair practice, 2 employees. We were averaging about $28K a month when it all started. I was in an office building, 5-story professional building, end of the hall, 2 large dental practices on the way to get to my practice. I was so, it was inauspicious, I would say. We basically were so humble at the point that I just basically afford payroll for 2 people. I had to take a job at a community health clinic for both Fridays and Saturdays, and I was working about 6.5 days a week just to be able to afford to pay payroll. So it wasn't like this practice fell on my lap. It was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of sacrifice. It was a lot of me getting beat up to get here. But I'm so happy things are in the right direction now, just kind of following some of these servant leadership principles. So Wildlife Dental Care now, we are located at Kaimuki. Kaimuki is a nice suburban community about 5 minutes outside of downtown Honolulu. That practice is about 9,000 square feet. It's 3 stories. We have a 3,500 square foot clinical space. Our top floor is 2,500 square feet. That's for my executives, my leaders, and my managers will have office space up there, as well as a conference room and training center. And our bottom floor is 3,000 square feet. That's our storage. We use that now as a storage facility for all our practice growth and future practices that we're going to be opening up in the near future. My dental care at Pearl Ridge practice is the one I talked about near Pearl Harbor. That one is in a large, well-known mall called Pearl Ridge. And the great thing about that place is it's probably one of the best positioned dental practices on that side of the island because it's affixed to this really well-known mall. It's at the entry point. It's this beautiful space, and at one time when we were first opening it back in 2013, I was literally competing with Starbucks for that space. And the only way I got that space was just because I happened to kind of really get to know the actual developer of the project, told them my story, discussed what we were going to do differently than a typical dental practice was, because he at one point had been a small entrepreneur himself, liked my story, and gave me the opportunity. He did not give me a rent break, which I'll talk about in a second. So I always tell people this, I always lead with this to make you feel ultimately better. So all you doctors out there who get pissed off at the rent you're paying and you think you're paying way too much, so let me just give you some context and some reality checks so you can feel immediately better about your situation. My Pearl Ridge practice, that what I got from Starbucks, 3,700 square feet, I pay $30,000 a month for. My space that's 3 stories, that's in Kaimuki, I pay $20,000 a month. So that's $50,000 nut right off the bat. So for all of you who are pissed off at your rent, just think about me and you'll immediately feel better. We have also recently, like I said before, we've opened up another practice. We've opened up a scratch practice called Honolulu Dental Care. It's located near a large mall called Ala Moana. We are basically, it's a smaller mindset than we typically have. We opened that with the understanding that we're going to use that as an office space of a story of many of us have probably heard about these, where it was a dental practice that did not fare too well during COVID. He was looking to basically dump his practice and just have someone take over his lease, which I did. So it was a good situation for us to go in there without paying too much capital up front, and we took over that practice. And our story is that we're kind of in that point where we're growing pretty well, and we're actually thinking of it being a space eventually for some specialists that we're going to hire into our company. I know Raj Guman doesn't like that idea of me hiring specialists, but it's one of the things we've actually talked about doing for our companies, because we think it's a good place where it doesn't have quite the exposure and frontage that my other practices have, so it's like one of those situations where it draws patients in just from signage. But we do think it's a wonderful space that we can actually go ahead and grow our practice through specialty treatment, and we think that's a good opportunity that we can possibly take on. The other practice that we haven't closed on quite yet, but I'm literally in the throes of the final funding for that particular practice, is we're going to be opening a practice in a windward side of our island called a small community called Kaneohe, and we're excited about that. That's our first acquisition. We're actually bringing on a practice with 2 doctors who have done well for several years. They're looking to retire within a year, but they're also looking for someone to help guide their practice and take over their administrative nightmares, and we're going to be able to come aboard, bring them great staff, great managers, great team leaders, and allow ourselves to take them on and then grow that practice eventually too. So within about a month or so, we should be 4 practices strong and doing pretty well by then. So one of the things I always share with people is that we're not like a special practice that, for lack of a better term, is like, just making money hand over foot. We're a typical practice like many of you. We're PPO, we're fee for service. We don't take Medicaid, we don't take capitation plans, but we're a strong PPO believer, and we actually think that's always going to be the way of the future in terms of growth, just based on where things are headed. We are open 7 days a week. We're one of those crazy people. We're open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, and Saturdays and Sundays we're open from 8 to 5. And we typically have felt that's the way to go. We'll talk about that story and why we did that, because it's not just a matter of me basically adding more hours for more revenue. We'll talk a bit about my story and why we did that and why the team actually made that happen. It wasn't just me. So essentially, numbers here. I'm not going to read through all of this. We see about 600 new patients a month between the organization. We got about 14 doctors besides myself. I'm no longer in the chair. I spend a lot of time training my doctors. I do jump in occasionally once in a while if 2 doctors go on vacation at the same time and they need my help, and I'll go in there and do mostly exams and kind of fill in the space, so to speak. But most of my efforts now are running the day-to-day kind of as a CEO would for an organization. So right now, as we talked about, our monthly average is about 1.1 million in production. We collect about 1.07, so we do a pretty good job of collecting what we produce. And in 2021, our first and second quarters, we did about 3.3, 3.2. A third quarter has not been too great. My fractional CFOs are out there probably snickering at me right now, because that third quarter wasn't so hot, but we're intending on rebounding strong and coming back in the end of the third quarter and fourth quarters for ourselves. Our goals for 2021, I really feel bullish about our model. I really do. I think what we learned during COVID and learned during the pandemic when offices were shutting down and contracting is that we really started to get a lot of market share. I mean, the fact, besides obviously being able to take over a failed practice and another practice that wants me to take over because they don't want to deal with the admin duties, we're really seeing that become more and more of a scenario that we can actually capitalize on, just because we feel as if we can bring a compelling model, help those organizations out, and then create a really compelling model that patients really love. So we're really excited about where we're headed with it. So this is something I'm really proud of. My team did this. So when we were going through COVID and when they were shutting dental practices down, they weren't letting us do hygiene, they were contracting how many patients walk into your office. There was a lot of folks in the practice and also in the community who were really just scared and just fearful of what was going to happen in the future. And because of my leadership, and this is where I was just so proud of them, is that they really wanted to basically take it head on. Their belief was like, well, Dr. Lewis, you told us that your core value is serve people better. We just can't somehow put that to the side because everyone's suffering right now. We have to find a way to keep our team employed. We have to find a way to get through this, even if it's only seeing emergencies, and we have to have some contracted hours in some capacity with our team members. We have to basically live out our mission. And so what they did, I had a few team members who made this. They made a video, and they put it on our social media, and they put it on our Facebook, and they ran it on our website for a little while. And I'm very proud of this because this is actually the genesis of what made us go from 7 to 7 to now 7 to 9, because of what they did in terms of making our availability to the public and being a better example. So I'll play the video and kind of show you what they did to basically really create a wonderful environment for our team. So the reason this was so exciting to me was because at the time when I was really fearful myself, and this is the one thing as a leader I would challenge all you leaders out to be vulnerable with your team. Vulnerability wins every single time with your team members. But I was really worried myself. I didn't know how it was going to work out. I was nervous about things. I was asking them, well, how am I going to live out my mission to you guys? How am I going to pay you guys? How am I going to serve people better? And this video kind of actually caused, for lack of a better, a lot of conversation in the practice. Like, well, how do we get through this? How do we make our scheduling? How do we do things? And they started working well together, and the dynamic was this. They started talking about how we had to be an example to the community. As many of your own communities have, businesses were closing, people were losing a lot of money, there was a lot of hopelessness going on. And my team at that point decided that we need to be the example in this community to show them we're not going to close, we're going to be open, we're going to give people the opportunity to understand this is what it looks like for an organization to get through tough times together. And it really started to kind of cause a conversation in the practice. So you wonder how I went from 7 to 7 to 7 to 9. So this is how we did it. So what happened is that when people started going back to work in Honolulu, and maybe had the same response in your own communities, we started finding many workers were working longer hours. Because what happened when companies lost all that money back in the pandemic, or like when we were all closed down and shut down for a while, all these companies now are trying to recover. So all their employees were staying longer hours, they were being more pressure, they weren't able to get off at 5 o'clock anymore, they're getting off at 6 or 7 or 8. And we started to see that thing happening in our practice. We started seeing these trends of situations where patients who normally would come in after 5, they were like asking us, do you have anything later for me? And so we kind of saw the writing on the wall, and my staff was like, hey, if we're gonna be this organization that serves people better, we better actually act it. And so what ended up happening was my hygiene or back office manager at the time, and she still is, by the way, I shouldn't say at the time. So what Marissa said is like, you know what, the reality is that unless we start kind of changing with the times and changing with the demands, we're not gonna resonate, we're not gonna be the practice that we anticipated us being. And so let's start focusing on creating a practice that actually allows ourselves to really help those patients who come in there, because we feel as if people will start reasoning that it's gonna be a more available place, that we actually are the practice for them. And so we did that. We took a challenge, we did a chance. And we actually did that, and I'll explain how we did that to get the team involved quickly about I'll talk about incentives and compensation. I'll discuss that because that's an important part of this. But the take was like understanding your market, understanding the environment, not being a slave to the norm or a slave to status quo, of understanding as a business you have to be nimble, you have to be flexible. If you want to resonate, if you want to grow, if you want to do better as a team, these are the things you're going to have to do. And what I would challenge you guys again as leaders out there, be vulnerable. If you're having a challenge, work with your team, collaborate. Those are the kind of things that make a big difference in the organization as you grow together. So I want to talk also about the idea of the Serve People Better moniker. I think a lot of times I'm always asked the question, like, well, how did Serve People Better even become a thing with you? Like, why is that your guys' core value? How does that even like inspire your staff? And so for me, Serve People Better is a very personal story to me. And if I get a little emotional, I always do, and I tell this story because it's very important in my life, and it's something that I experienced when I was very young, and it's still, when I repeat this story, it always makes me choke up a little bit. So my father, Norman Lewis, he's there in the middle there, he is a severe chronic asthmatic, not the kind of asthmatic who can have an inhaler or take an oral steroid. He's the kind of asthmatic that needs to be near a respiratory clinic and needs to be on a ventilator at certain times of his life. And so when I was 16 years old, it was like maybe, I think it was a Friday afternoon, probably about 4:45, my father had one of these asthmatic attacks, right? So my brother and I, we used to having oxygen tanks in our home, we hooked up my father, and he was responding, but he was still under great duress. We started watching him turn blue. And so my brother and I, thankfully, we were old enough to figure, like, we gotta get him down to the respiratory clinic. There's no way he's gonna make this. We drive down there. We get down there. It's 5 minutes before 5, 4:55. I run in. These are people we go in all the time. We see them all the time. They're people who are in the healthcare field. They're supposed to be there in your time of need. When we arrived, we were told, as my father is limply hanging on there, we can't see you right now. You got to go to the emergency room. I'm sorry. So my brother and I, what are you talking about? It's like, we see the ventilator right there. It's available. Your doctor's right in the back. I see him over there. Why can't we go back? Well, I'm sorry. It's getting near closing time, and that's just policy. And until then, my perception of the healthcare community, they're heroes to me. Like, these people are there when you need us. They're there when you need them. These people make a conscious lifestyle choice that they're going to be available and nurture you at times when you need it. And in that time of need, they chose not to. They chose lifestyle over care. And so for me, that made a fundamental change on me. I basically made a choice that, whatever I did, whatever business I got into, I was going to just be a little bit better than that. I wanted to create a business. I wanted to create something that would resonate, that if you're going to say things like you're going to take care of people, you better damn mean it. So for me, going to 7 to 9, it's not about making more money. It's about being better, about being accessible. It's being there when your patients need you. Because guess what happened when we opened to 7 to 9? We saw a ton of emergencies. Tons of emergencies. And so we learned very quickly that that particular void in the market was there, and more importantly, we met it. And I'm so proud of my team because now we're able to basically be authentic about saying, serve people better. So I'm very excited about that for our organization. So I'm always saying this. This is the thing I talked about earlier. The people are so important. Leaders out there, whether you're doctors, whether you're managers, whether you're directors, whether you're a lead, whether you're just a front office assistant manager, or whether you're someone who's just got brand new, you've got to understand your leaders out there. You've got to take care of these people. I'm always kind of like, as much as it's kind of funny sometimes to kind of, to talk about, oh, my front office screwed this up again, or oh, this assistant. And I get that. It's okay to be frustrated. We're all human beings. We have those moments. But unless you as a leader are looking at to find ways to make them win, find ways to make them feel engaged, find ways to make them feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves, they're never going to actually make that transformative leap you want to create that better organization for yourself. So I'm always telling my team, especially my doctors, I'm always kind of making sure they understand this. I said, you have 2 people to serve. One are your patients. Obviously, we all know that. But you got to be better about serving your team. Like little things, like telling my doctors, when things go right, look for something right and then acknowledge your staff member. We did a little trick with a couple of doctor friends of mine in my practice who aren't really the most open and they're not the most sensitive kind of guys. And so I gave them a trick. Might think about doing this yourself for your associate doctors. I gave them 3 marbles. I said, put 3 marbles in your right pocket. And your job today is to give 3 compliments. And every time you give a compliment, put the other marble in the other pocket, right? Sounds silly, but it came down to within a month, I had assistants who were smiling. I had doctors who were saying, man, I didn't realize they were so cool, But just by looking at those kind of things of leadership, the small things matter, the small things actually apply, they build, and they create so much synergy that I would recommend that you spend more time. So mentoring your doctors, mentoring your leaders to do these things are critically important for your operations. So the thing I want to talk about now is essentially how we go about teaching leadership in my organization. And so the one thing that we're probably used to seeing in a typical paradigm of leadership, and we see this all the time when you think of the business of old, where you have the CEO or the owner doctor, and it all kind of trickles down on this pyramid, right? So we kind of know this is top-down leadership, and I think we're all learning that model don't work no more, right? And so what we focus in our organization is something called the servant leadership model. So what we think of is that, I always kind of talk to my leaders about this, think of it like the upside-down pyramid, right? And we talk about certain kind of phases that you have to go through to establish that true servant leadership model in your actual business for yourself. So for us, the first thing I'm talking to my leaders about, before I even get strategy, before I even start to get to the point where we get task-oriented, we always start with the will, right? Do you have the will to basically put your needs behind the needs of your team? Meaning that, are you looking to have your team succeed before yourself? Because if you're not, your goals are never going to be achieved. The second thing we focus on them is, we call it love, not the romantic kind of love, but literally caring about your team and looking for ways that you can actually serve them in a way of making them more comfortable, more supported in the organization, so you're really focusing on their goals and ambitions as well. The thing we find also after that is that once you can establish those first two things, that leads to a great culture. That bleeds into other people in your organization. That starts to lead into things in service and sacrifice that people start to become very, very comfortable with because they see everyone else doing it. And then once we see our leaders being really good at that, they establish themselves as authorities in the practice, and what do you know? They become leaders. And so these are the things that we focus on regularly. Even though it might seem like this ethereal kind of foo-foo kind of stuff, this is the stuff we focus on a tangible level and focusing our leaders to be doing so they can develop into leaders and not just be taskmasters for the organization. So how do we go about making all that ethereal stuff work, though? And it all sounds nice to kind of be these, kumbaya practice, right? And we're just like any of you. We've got our blemishes, we've got the inevitable turnover, we've got the big problems, just like all of you run into from a staff challenge. So don't feel for a second that I've got it all figured out. But what we do is we create mission-driven incentive plans to make sure that the right behavior is going to be rewarded. And so you've probably heard about some of these already. Many of the practices that have been up here have already talked about this. Like one of the things we're always doing is that because we're open later, from 6 to 9, as you guys know, we pay our hygienists more money. They get $45 an hour in the morning from 7 to 5. But once we hit that magical primetime hour of 6, they immediately make $60 an hour. And then we're paying them, if they have a second patient, we're paying them $20 for the second patient. So they can make $80 an hour just to have that double book right there. And some of our hygienists, we don't push it, we leave it up to them. If they want to see a pedo, that's a pedo cleaning next to that, and they can do it without sacrificing quality or care, we'll do that, and they can make $100 an hour. So the opportunity's there. Again, it's just rewarding the kind of behavior. Like we feel as if we're going to basically provide this service for the practice and service for the patient, and we're going to basically have people who are going to be staffed for those hours. We need to reward that behavior because they're helping us. We're getting patients down there for doing dentistry. It's an emergency. It's high production for us. We're getting patients who come at that time who've got great insurance plans, who typically agree to treatment recommendations because they have the wherewithal as well as the dental IQ to want to go forward and do that. So why wouldn't I reward people with more money at that time of the day? Okay? Go into each one of those. That's for you guys to look at when you guys go home. But this is all our typical departments that are affected. I would encourage you to do that for your own. It's just a nice way of finding out how to tangibly make that leadership or that servant leadership actually work in your own organization. So let's talk a little bit about my model. Because I'm oftentimes getting peppered with this on a regular basis, like, why would you open 7 days? No one's going to want to work for you. Why the heck would you want to have hours past 5 o'clock? Why would you want to work weekends? It doesn't seem to make any sense. It seems like a pretty terrible place to work. When the first thing I always go to is like, okay, well, let's talk about your patients, right? What do your patients really want? I just talked about, and this is a true thing going on in Honolulu, it's more difficult for patients to get off between 8 to 5 Monday through Friday right now. I mean, what we've noticed, obviously, is people have to be at work longer. What we're also seeing is that, like, my son goes to a middle school, and last year, he was a distance learner for an entire year. So you think they would have kept up and kept things on track. They didn't. So now they're catching up. So my son is a 13-year-old. He's an 8th grader at middle school. And now he's getting like homework assignments like at 5 o'clock, which are due the next day at 8 o'clock. Like they're literally cramming in all this extra stuff, which makes it harder and harder for students, for obviously parents, for obviously, we just talked about how work hours got longer. They're making it more difficult for them to be accessing your dental practice between the conventional hours we're used to now. So I'm just saying, it just makes sense. I mean, you're just trying to think along the line of like, if you're a service industry, which I'm going to challenge you guys, I think one of the things I want to tell you, because I find this happen to me all the time, is someone will tell me, well, I'm not a service industry. I'm not like a hotel. I'm not a restaurant. I'm like, well, I hate to tell you. I would challenge you. You are a service industry. Your product just happens to be teeth. And you have to live in those kind of realities for yourself. Because if you think, for example, that people will come when you want to, or you're that important, or their priority for you is that intense, I would probably challenge you. It's probably not going to happen, nor will it be happening in the future. So again, I go on like a graph. Chrisette has this graph as well. Get some water here. So we do, much like Chrisette, we do surveys ourselves. And so we'll oftentimes reach out to our patients through social media. We'll do that through emails and texts, and we'll ask them questions like, when do you want to get in for a dental cleaning? What's the best time for you? And it's just pretty much like Chrisette's figured out, about 90% of your patients, they want to come in before, after work, or the weekends. Yet, where do we think we're putting most of our patients? And even in my practice, 75% of them still getting scheduled in the middle of the week, middle of the day, right? So we're obviously need to understand that we need to be better about being a better service model. Your patients, your clients, your customers are telling you they want something. We're just not delivering it well enough. So this is why I'm tending to think you just have to understand this is where things are headed. You're a service industry, start acting like one. So I use this as just kind of being like kind of the bad news we have to all face, right? The golden age of dentistry is gone. I remember back in the 90s, there was the extreme makeover shows, and there was a lot of CE courses talked about, redoing people's smiles and doing big cases. And to a certain point, they're still around. Patients do that. But I think if you're leading with that as being your model for durability and growth in your business, I really feel that's not going to be something sustainable, especially if you're thinking about growing a practice with associate model where you're not going to basically be able to control that certain level of quality from patient to patient to patient. It can be a daunting thing to do to try to make a practice based off big cases. And then from a sensibility standpoint, I mean, let's talk about the retail experience, right? Let's all blame Amazon. Well, why can't we? We always do, right? And think about what they've done for the actual customer experience, right? People like Amazon because what? It's easy. It's fast, it doesn't cost a lot. If they don't like it, they get paid back, right? So that's happening in our own industry. I mean, I'm not saying we're going to become the Amazons, don't get me wrong, but I think that sensibility becomes people are expecting instant gratification based on their terms, not on our model anymore. I'm just saying, just putting it out there for you. So I always kind of tell people, I really don't think of our practice model outside the box. I don't think of it as being some kind of, just kind of wild, kind of different model that somehow will blow up on us simply because we're just living in the world that patients live, right? Your patients are busy people, just like you are. They're working between 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. What they want is they want to find a business that serves them on their terms. They want to find a business that actually helps them serve them when they want you, not when you want it, when they do. And so I'm just basically doing essentially what your customers want. So we talked about this before. We're not in the teeth business anymore. I'm not trying to dispel the fact we're in healthcare. It's very important. I take it very seriously at providing quality dentistry in our practice. But I'm just getting you to look at it from the business model. Like, how do your patients perceive this, right? We oftentimes think too often that it's about the things that we hold value to, or we really put a lot of time and obsession into. But it's really about a situation where if you can actually address things on their needs, you're going to find a much more successful, predictable model of bringing in more patients, by having more growth to fill those hygiene schedules. And then the last thing I talk about is this. I'm going to give credit to Dr. Todd Bickling. He's been getting a lot of credit at this conference. I think he's an amazing guy. One of the things we also focus on is, like, it goes back to the idea of not being big case focused, right? Try to make sure you understand the likability factor is a real thing. Your patients are basically not expecting to be overwhelmed and be dazzled by dentistry. I'm not saying not to diagnose stuff. I am just saying when you present treatment, try to do it in small bites rather than all at once. You're going to scare your patients off. They're not going to want to stick around for you. So again, that service, understanding from a service model what they want to hear, not what you want to tell them, okay? So this is the thing I'm always, again, kind of just infusing a little bit of practicality. I think a lot of times, in our practice, we have a very, modern, good-looking practice. But one thing I'm always telling doctors is that if you think the dental spa will work, and maybe in a small, isolated market, but I think if your goal is to grow and to basically multiply that and to kind of create a scalable entity, I just don't think that's something that you really are going to differentiate yourself. I mean, the reality is that your patients, they like nice places, but they're just not dazzled by it as much as you think they might be. And again, talking about dentistry and technology and equipment, I think one of the things that I always kind of find a challenge is that, and this, my associate doctors are always wondering, why don't you market the laser? Why don't you market the iTero? Why don't you market, the CBCT we have? And I'm like, well, that's not going to make you any different. I mean, at the end of the day, what I really focused on is, like I said before, I just focus on what they want. I think oftentimes we as dentists start to think they want what we think is great, but ultimately all they really think about is that you're just kind of expensive. So I always try to tell you guys, get them in the front door. Get them in the front door, make an impression. If it makes you a better dentist to use that, use it. But don't lead with that thinking that it's going to somehow surprise your patients and thinking, oh, what a wonderful guy this guy is. So again, think in terms of what your patients want, right? Your patients they don't want inflexible payment plans. They want people who are going to work with them in some capacity. They don't want to go to your fancy consult room, right, where you have all your awards and the pictures of all the great CE you have. You know what they honestly think when they see that stuff? This guy looks expensive. Sorry. I mean, that's kind of what they say, okay? Really long new patient exams, another one of my pet peeves. And I know at one point, and I was trained this way, I went to the Pankey Institute like some of you out here went to, and it was an hour-and-a-half new patient exam. You'd take some tracings, you would spend time taking photos, you would go over the entire process of diagnosis, and then discuss what kind of cleaning they might need. Guess how many of those patients stuck around for the second appointment? 5% in my practice when I was doing that kind of stuff. Doesn't work. Your patients come for a cleaning. Give them a cleaning. Give them what they want, find out what they want, deliver it on a massive scale. And again, it's not the stuff you think it is. Inevitably, it typically meets three things I always tell people. What your patients kind of really value is their time, their money, and you better not hurt them. If you can get those three things figured out, 90% of your practice gets taken care of. The other 10% you figure out as you go along. But I'm just trying to provide you guys replicable systems that will help you grow predictably, okay? And this is another thing I'm always talking about. We talk about the appointments, make the available appointments, but this is another thing I think is really highly undervalued by doctors and practices out there. Call your patients back. If your patients call you, we're all busy, I get it. But what they want to know is that you're available and you're accessible to them, because that's becoming a big thing with patients. Accessibility is getting huge with patients as a pet peeve. If they have the feeling that you're not available for them, if you're too busy or you have the perception that you don't care, think how they're going to blast you on social media. Think about how they're going to basically tell their friends that they didn't call me back. And it's just stuff that's so easy to do, right? I'm just being honest. That's becoming more and more of a trend. I get all my doctors to understand that when a patient calls, you're going to call that person in 24 hours, if not less. We don't want to get that process to the point where we're not serving people better. So what do they really want? We talked about the convenient appointments. We've talked about flexible paying arrangements. I mean, we've talked a lot about that already at the meeting. I don't want to go too much into semantics there. One I always talk about, and this is the one thing that I think is another thing that's really a good, tangible thing that I would encourage all your associate doctors doing, and in fact, if you're the owner doctor, still doing it. Every patient who gets a needle, give them a call. I mean, I used to think when I was doing that early in my phase of my career that it was a nice additive feature, that it was a nice customer service thing to do. We're finding more and more as you run these surveys through our practice that people expect it. They're expecting you to call, they're expecting you to follow up, and if you don't, they're thinking that you have not done a good job in caring for them. I'm just thinking that that's something you may have to adopt in terms of being a regular part of what you do, okay? So the next phase we always talk about when it comes to serving people better, and from a customer service standpoint, sometimes I think we make the mistake of thinking, give the customer what they want, which is great, but oftentimes it's the unsaid stuff that goes neglected from us, right? And this is the stuff I talk to my team about constantly. I always let my team understand that you have to figure out their pain points and then find out what they really want and then deliver it. For a perfect example being how we go about scheduling a patient into the prime time, right? Rather than asking the patient and saying, hey, would you want to come in at 7 o'clock tonight? Patient might think, nah, I've got dinner, I got a family thing. Nah, just give me like the 2 o'clock. Well, rather than just simply saying, oh, okay, no problem, I'll put you at 2, our team are trained to do the following. It's like, hey, Mr. Jones, let's get you a 7 o'clock appointment. Don't you work from 8 to 5? And I know that you're getting really busy. You told me last time how busy work is. Let's get you an appointment at 7 p.m. tonight. That way we know there won't be distractions, it won't inconvenience you, and it'll work out wonderful for you. Oh, okay, sure. Again, had we not presented it that way, we would have put that person at 2 o'clock, and what do you think would have happened? Well, 50% of the time, and at least in our practice of late, 50% of the time, he doesn't show up. Oh, I had this work thing. It didn't quite work out. I'm sorry. I got to reschedule. But if you anticipate that you know that's going to happen, and you design your scripting and you design your scheduling that way, you're going to get people into the right appointments, and they're going to show up, okay? So the other thing I'm talking about, we talked about don't overwhelm them with big treatment choices. So how do we get around that? So one of the things I want to address is that sometimes I'm being told by doctors, well, you can't, if they have all this pathology, you've got to talk to them about it. Well, I'm not saying don't talk about it. I'm just saying when it comes to presenting the treatment plan, don't hit them all at once, right? So one of the things we do is we just kind of phase out things that make it more palatable. Using that likability factor that's kind of within or a little under their insurance maximum, we do it that way. It just be done in more bite-sized pieces. Just kind of find that way. And again, the wonderful thing is you may start that way. Let's say you got a patient who needs a lot of work, a lot of crowns. After the first 2 appointments where you've demonstrated to that person that they can trust you, that you do a good job on them, that you don't hurt them, after that, then you can kind of open up. The likability factor expands, as Dr. Bickling has said. You're going to find that you might start out just doing a few little things, but as they like you more, you can expand that. That'll happen naturally as a progression of them trusting you more, okay? We talked about this. always, the conference talked about this quite a bit. Pre-booking your next appointment is so critical. I mean, Justin has mentioned this many times, Justin Koch there from San Antonio, how critically important is to have the next appointment set up. That's an incredible thing in terms of anticipating that patient needs to do that, because if you don't do that, inevitably, not only will you not have things on their schedule, they blame you later because you didn't appoint them correctly. I'm just being honest. They're gonna blame you first. You might as well get them on the schedule. Like, oh, you didn't get me a call, you didn't get my appointment. Well, I didn't want to bother you, I'm sorry. Well, it's your job to bother them. It's your job to help them. Like, think of it this way. You're anticipating the pain points, meet that need, and you're going to find that the patient's going to be much happier about it. So I always tell people, servant leadership in terms of how it encapsulates in our practice is like, it's like not necessarily being someone who is going to be a doormat, who's going to basically take all the abuse and just be this real rah, really sweet person. No, it's not that at all. It's really about learning how you can serve people better and finding out their pain points and actually being someone who can elevate their needs and elevate their performance by actually going about driving a team-built practice than one focused on solely on task-oriented kind of things going on. So oftentimes I'm asked this question, like, how do you go about in your organization scaling leadership? Like, I know it's easy for me to sit up here and talk about all the things that I've done and, oh, we do this and my team does this, but it was very intentional. So let me talk about this. I want to make sure I can help you guys on how to do this. So the first thing I'm going to tell you about is owners out there, don't get stuck in the ownership trap. And what the ownership trap for me is, everything must flow through you, or you feel you need to be the answer man for everything. Like, you shouldn't be making a decision on the toilet paper for the break room. That shouldn't be your job, okay? You shouldn't be the one coming for every problem in the organization. You have team members for that. Your job is to kind of figure out how to delegate properly so that you're not in that position. But it starts with the mindset. You're going to trust your people and understand as you're trusting them in the beginning, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to make wrong calls. But you have to allow that to develop them as leaders. And it's important you do those things or else you'll never get out of the ownership trap, okay? The second thing we talk about, and this is something we talk about constantly in my leadership meetings, build teams, not just teeth, right? So your organization should always be talking about how you can go about creating organizations that are team-driven, having great meetings, having managers lead those meetings, and leading it to the point where me, as the owner, doctor, the CEO, my job is just to make sure that we're being in line with the core values. Like, whatever they're talking about, whatever they're doing, I'm leading from that rather than leading it from a tangible situation of saying, do this, do that. It doesn't go that way with me anymore, okay? Number three, excuse me. You have to start stress testing your practice. So for those who want to go in this direction, who want to grow, who want multiple practices, who want to have a larger entity, you're going to have to stress test it, which means a lot of times, like right now as I'm speaking, my practice is operating. And I know right now mistakes are probably being made a little bit. But that's part of the process. You have to allow that. You got to get to a point where you're trusting the practice to move forward. And my good friend John Christensen always has told me, you got to trust, but you're verifying. So make no mistake. I'm letting them do what they got to do, but I'm going to go back later and look at our numbers, see how we did, ask questions. But unless you're stress testing your practice, if you're always involved in some capacity, it'll never grow past yourself. Okay? Last thing, this thing I'm going to show a little bit about. One thing this thing that also would be really helpful for you all is that I know a lot of you already have standard operating procedures. I'm going to challenge you to consider doing this. This has actually worked out really well for our organization. We have created kind of a resource for our entire practice for training, for information about our staff's benefits, or information about techniques in terms of clinical techniques or scripting we do. And we create a website that we use now to kind of provide resources to our team, so it's not predicated on one special person to train certain skill sets. It's actually done so that we actually have a resource they can go to, so now we're actually able to scale the organization. Now we have a centralized website that allows us to go about teaching our people. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how it looks here. So the first one, like, this is just me having a talk. One of our themes this year is authenticity. So I'll play a video and talking about what I talk about, showing the team what we're trying to basically be better about. And that kind of sets the tone. And then from that, we've got training resources to help them meet those objectives in their own departments.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ced. Hey, I just want to have a great announcement just to show you here. New shirts came in. I'm so excited about it. Can't wait to give it to you all. But before I hand it out, we're going to definitely do that for you at the all-team meetings. I wanted to basically share again why we have this moniker. Authenticity will be our path. I want to talk a little bit about those things.
So again, these are like little videos I do for everyone in our department does this thing. So all the leaders, the managers do that for each department. We have a short video to kind of get people's attention. If I would tell you in terms of how long you want to keep these videos, no longer than 15. I'd keep most of them 5 minutes, because people lose attention really quick on those kind of videos. But they're great for catching attention. They're great for actually having people go to resources. So this is just a screenshot of the actual site itself. I'd encourage you guys to consider this for your own organization. Each department has their own training sites. The doctors will have all the department. They can click on any of those subject lines there and have video content. They'll have research material. They'll have papers talking about certain things they want to learn. It does take time, but it's really worth it if you're trying to create an organization not dependent on certain individuals, but more processes that you want to have across the whole organization. This is just another slide. This is my doctor onboarding. You're welcome to look at this and use it for yourselves. We just basically encapsulate the onboarding as three things: clinical, operations, leadership, and communication. And so our doctors know when they go through the process, this is going to be how we're going to go through each department and how each subject is taken care of, so they feel comfortable knowing what they're going to be taught in the organization. Okay? So the conclusion here is this. I mean, again, I keep saying that. I think what I want to make sure you understand is, like, being a servant leader does not mean being a weak leader. It doesn't mean like you're kind of this guy who's just trying to plug holes and be the kind of the person who's always just making feeling better. I would honestly tell you, most of my job now is just making sure I'm having good conversations, some of them difficult, like asking questions like why we aren't doing certain things. Like if we have certain, let's say disruptions in the practice, or certain, let's say performances aren't going well, asking what's going on. But doing it in a fashion that basically lets them understand I'm there to support them. Like, okay, well, we'll talk about things like, what are the expectations? What are we trying to do? Where are the impediments for you? Where are the challenges happening? So my job now is to basically identify those things, but oftentimes not take the problem, but give it back to them with the understanding, okay, well, now we have expectations, and now this is still your job, but for a fact that I'm going to support you through the whole event. So that's an important thing I think that needs to be understood, is that you're not taking on people's problems, you're just helping them, provide them context to know how to deal with it, but more importantly, understand they're going to be supported the entire way. So in conclusion, one of the things I like to always, I'm very, very proud of is that in the last year, my business partner, Matt Kennedy, he's over there, and I have put together a podcast. So a lot of the questions some of you might even feel and have out there right now, we probably talked about. So we had this basically start in June of 2020. And in that, we kind of basically walked through the entire mode of how it takes from mindset to leadership skills to tangible ways we build a practice to how you go about doing some of the things that I've talked about at this conference. I encourage you to go listen to it. They're about 20 or 30 minutes long. They really spend a long time talking about all the things that I probably discussed in this conference. I'd recommend you go. It's free. It can be found on many of the places you find podcasts. I'd recommend you look at it. And I've also put together a book. I mean, this is a great story of what I went through. I think one of the things that I'm very honest and transparent about is that the practice growth I had and the size that we are now didn't just happen because I suddenly became a lucky guy. I took a beating. I'm always very honest about that. Like, I'm always at these conferences, I'm always challenging John. People need to be more honest in how things screw up. People need to be more transparent about how hard this really is, because it ain't easy. I was just talking to the Dales, Dr. Dale, and listening to their stories. And they're in the same boat we're in. We're all trying to grow, but we're all dealing with the same problems you guys got. It's a struggle. I get it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have the magic sauce, but I will tell you that I can walk with you. I've been there. I'm on the journey with you. And that's the thing I want to share with you in that book, is that this book talks about the journey, talks about the things I had to do to pivot, but more importantly, it makes you feel as if you're not alone in this. That's the thing I want to probably provide the most. I want to be there to understand that your troubles, your challenges are something I faced myself, and more importantly, I want to help you out with. So in that theme, this is something I've talked about. For those who've been in ChrisAd for a while, I've been talking about this for a while, and it's finally coming to fruition. So I've talked about this on the podcast. We're putting together a coaching group called Next Level Academy. It's something that I'm really, really strongly and passionate about, because I've been where you're sitting right now. I've been in the dark, watching these speakers talk about their great practices and how well they're doing, and I get excited about it, but then I'm sitting there thinking, like, holy crap, how am I going to do that? I mean, it sounds nice, but that just sounds like brutally hard. I don't know if I can make that happen. Or you're sitting there with your staff, and your staff is thinking, if this guy does this, I'm quitting. That's it, I'm done. I'm moving. I'm not doing that. But what I like to do is, this is something it's impactful for me. I want to help you. I want to help the team. I want to help you so you can guide people with the right foundation, understanding the mistakes I made. Because you're going to make a lot of the mistakes I made, and I can help you avoid some of those things. Now, some of them you're still going to make, and it's part of the growth. And I would say that again. Part of the growth, part of going in this direction, is you're going to get a little more bulletproof. You're going to be able to tolerate certain things which seemed impossible, but now they're going to be possible because I'm going to help you guys teach some of those kind of things. So again, I'm excited about this. In fact, I'm going to bring on my business partner, Matt Kennedy, so he can tell you a little bit more about it. Matt Kennedy.
Thanks, Ed. Good job, man. So quickly, Next Level Academy is really just a platform that we've built to help you not only grow, but also to build a better business, a business that can outlast you. You know, a lot of the numbers that we see, and they're wonderful, and they drive a lot of decisions that we make in the dental practice, but a lot of the numbers that we see are top-line revenue numbers, right? They're production numbers or collections numbers, right? And those things are fantastic, but also if you have been trying to implement some of this on your own, you might be finding that you're running into some profitability issues. So we want to help you not only grow, we certainly want to do that, but also want to help you focus on profitability and, again, building a better business. And I want to give you just a quick little tip here. If you would take just a moment, doctors, and view your practice through the lens or the eyes of an investor. So let me ask you a question. If you were just an investor, you were not a dentist, you could not by law, do what you do to make money in your dental practice, but you're an investor looking to buy a business to create cash flow for themselves, would you buy your business? Would you buy your practice? Many times what we have found is that we're great at creating a wonderful income, but that doesn't quite translate into being a great asset. So we're going to talk about a lot of those things in Next Level Academy, and we've built it in 3 parts. It's 1 part training and teaching. We want to give you a predictable process to build a business that can outlast you. That's what folks have been talking about, a business that can work whether you're there or not, that can outlast you. Secondly, we have built it to be 1 part implementation and action focused. So every week you'll have action plans, you'll be able to go right back into your practice and have forward momentum to get you to where you want to go. And then we've also built it 1 part community. Not only will you learn from Dr. Lewis and the Next Level Academy team, but you will learn from each other the successes and the struggles, all of that. So we're excited to announce it and launch it. To find out some more information, in front of you, you'll find a flyer that looks like this. Go ahead and grab that for me. And on the back, there's a QR code. And if your phone is close to you, convenient, mine's in my pocket here, go ahead and click on that QR code. I'll do it with you. And you'll find several links. First, if you'd like to purchase a copy of Dr. Lewis's book, that's the first link. Click right there. You can get that copy. Second, to find out more about Next Level Academy, some frequently asked questions, what does more of the structure look like? Please go there. In today's world, we can do this virtually, so we'll meet every Friday. It's going to be a weekly meeting, so it'll be convenient and immediately impactful for you. And then also you can subscribe to our podcast, and as said, told you, we've had a lot of fun doing it and hope that it's helpful. So please check us out there. And then finally, honestly, the best way to learn about Next Level Academy is that last link, schedule a strategy call, just to discover if Next Level is a fit for you. We'll spend some time with you on the phone. We'd love to hear about your practice and what your challenges are. Let you know if we think we can help. So we look forward to hopefully helping lots of folks in the room. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so again, this is just something where there's no pressure. I mean, what usually happens to me, and like some of you out there may know this, I get a lot of calls from many of you out there. I get a lot of texts from many of you out there. It always hurts me that I can't spend more time answering your questions and working with you, and because I literally don't have the time. I mean, one of the things that I'm finding is that as you get more practices, you have less time, obviously. But it's implicit in me to help. I really fundamentally believe that you have to constantly pay it forward. I've been so blessed to have great mentors and great people who have actually lifted my game. I just want to be a part of that process. I want to be a part of the journey. And like I said before, it means a lot when I help people. It brings me great joy, it brings me great fulfillment. And if you want to be a part of it, great. If you don't, no problem. But at the same time, I want to provide at least some options for you who might need that extra step to kind of go, or that extra support to go in the step or the direction that you want to go for your practice. So I just provided some books here, just resources. I'm not going to go through each one of these. A lot of you out there like to read. There's audiobooks for these books here. I find these have been great ones for me, especially when it comes to leadership and getting your head right so you can go in this direction. I recommend all these books are wonderful. I want to conclude by really giving thanks and gratitude. As some of you might know, I'm in a mastermind group with some of the guys in this room. We meet quarterly. We go to some wonderful places. One of those kind of my main mentor, John Christensen, as you guys all know, he was one of the people who actually was one of the genesis to having this mastermind together. It's a wonderful group. These people provide me strength when I don't have it. They provide me support when I need it. They wipe my tears when I have them. And so I feel very strong. These people I consider family to me, and I want to thank all of you who are here from the mastermind. You've been wonderful to me. Thank you so much. And then obviously my beautiful wife, my North Star, my East, my West, my sunrise, my sunset. I love you, dear. Thank you.
We love you too.
This is my contact information. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Have a wonderful time.
Thank you. Very good stuff.